What began as a routine late-night interview turned into television chaos when Samuel L. Jackson walked off Jimmy Kimmel Live following a heated exchange over Hollywood's treatment of veteran black actors. The tension was evident the moment Jackson stepped onto the stage. What should have been a standard promotional interview for his latest film quickly became one of the most uncomfortable moments in late-night television history. Jackson, known for his commanding presence and no-nonsense demeanor, appeared unusually reserved as he sat across from Kimmel. The host opened with his usual humor, but something felt different tonight. Perhaps it was the recent criticism of his interviewing style or pressure from declining ratings. But Kimmel seemed more aggressive than usual. His first question carried an undertone that immediately put Jackson on edge. "So, Sam, you've been in Hollywood for decades. Some people say it might be time for the older generation to step aside and make room for new faces. What's your take on that?" Kimmel asked, smirking. Jackson's expression shifted. The question was not only inappropriate, but insulting. Here was a man who had built a legendary career spanning over 40 years being asked if he should retire on national television. The audience felt the tension instantly, their laughter from Kimmel's monologue fading into uneasy silence. "Excuse me?" Jackson replied, his voice carrying the edge that moviegoers knew meant trouble was coming. "Are you seriously asking me if I should retire because of my age?" Kimmel, perhaps realizing he had struck a nerve, but doubling down instead of stepping back, leaned forward. "Well, I mean, there's a lot of discussion in Hollywood about making space for younger talent. Some critics say certain actors keep recycling the same performances." Jackson's jaw tightened. This was no longer a poorly thought-out question. It was a direct attack on his craft and legacy. The audience murmured, sensing something unprecedented was unfolding. "Let me get this straight," Jackson said, dangerously calm. "You brought me on your show to tell me I'm washed up and should make room for younger actors. Is that what this is?" Kimmel's nervous laughter filled the silence. "No, I'm just asking your thoughts on Hollywood's changing landscape. It's a legitimate question." "Legitimate?" Jackson's voice rose slightly. "What's legitimate about suggesting experience and skill should be discarded for youth? What's legitimate about implying my 4 decades in this business mean nothing?" The host seemed aware he was in dangerous territory, but tried to deflect with humor instead of apologizing. "Hey, I'm just the messenger here. Don't shoot the messenger, right?" The joke fell flat. Jackson stared at Kimmel for a long moment before speaking deliberately. "You think this is funny? Disrespecting someone who's been in this industry since before you knew what a camera was is comedy." The audience was silent. Even the band members seemed frozen. This was no typical late-night banter. This was a real confrontation between two men with very different views on respect and professionalism. Kimmel pressed on. "Look, I respect what you've done, but some of your recent choices haven't been, let's say, Oscar-worthy." The moment the words left his mouth, the studio's tension spiked. Jackson's eyes narrowed, his posture stiffening. Kimmel had questioned his artistic integrity on live television. "Oscar-worthy," Jackson repeated slowly, his voice weighted with decades of experience and battles fought in Hollywood. "You want to talk Oscar-worthy? Let's talk about how many black actors have been overlooked by the Academy. Let's talk about how the industry has undervalued performers who look like me for generations." Kimmel shifted uncomfortably, realizing that what he intended as light banter had become serious. Instead of acknowledging his mistake, he made another critical error. "Come on, Sam. You can't play the race card every time someone criticizes your work," Kimmel said dismissively. The words hung in the air. The audience gasped, and even the cameraman recoiled. Jackson sat still for a moment, processing the remark, before responding with controlled fury. "The race card," he said, each word deliberate and sharp. "Did you just tell me that pointing out systemic racism in Hollywood is playing a card?" The interview had officially crossed a line with no turning back. Jackson leaned forward, his legendary composure beginning to crack. You know what, Jimmy? I've been in this business long enough to recognize when someone is trying to bait me. I've been patient enough to give you the benefit of the doubt. But what you just said crossed every line of professional decency. Kimmel, sensing he'd gone too far, but unwilling to back down before a live audience, made another misstep. Look, I'm just trying to have an honest conversation here. Maybe you're being a little too sensitive about this whole thing. The word sensitive seemed to ignite something in Jackson. His hands gripped the chair's arms, his voice dropping to that menacing whisper familiar from his films. Sensitive? You think calling out your unprofessional behavior makes me sensitive? The studio audience froze, watching what felt like a car crash in slow motion. Even Kimmel's usually supportive crowd seemed uneasy. The cameras captured every micro-expression, documenting what was quickly becoming television history. I think maybe we should take a commercial break, the producer whispered off camera. But both men were too locked in to notice. Kimmel, sweating under the studio lights and pressure, pressed on. Sam, you're overreacting to some simple questions. This is exactly the kind of attitude that makes people think Hollywood actors are out of touch with reality. Jackson rose slowly, his full presence commanding the studio. The audience collectively held its breath. Out of touch with reality. Let me tell you about reality. Jimmy, reality is being one of the highest grossing actors in film history and still having to justify my place in this industry to someone like you. Someone like me, Kimmel shot back, finally losing his temper. I'm just asking the questions everyone else is thinking. Maybe the problem isn't the questions. Maybe it's your ability to handle criticism. Jackson's voice filled the studio, carrying decades of frustration. Criticism. You call disrespect and racial dismissiveness criticism. You've shown more respect to comedians promoting their Netflix specials than you've shown me tonight. Mill made one final mistake. Standing, he pointed directly at Jackson. Don't lecture me about respect when you can't even handle a simple interview without losing your cool. Maybe this is why people think it's time for you to step back. The studio fell silent. Jackson stared at Kimmel, processing the full weight of the words. Finally, in a quiet but final tone, he said, "You know what, Jimmy? You're right about one thing. It is time for me to step back. I'm stepping back from this interview, from this show, and from giving people like you any more of my time or energy." Jackson removed his microphone with deliberate, controlled movements, despite his anger. The audience watched in stunned silence as one of Hollywood's most respected actors prepared to walk away. Kimmel, realizing the magnitude of the moment, tried to salvage it. "Sam, come on. Let's calm down and finish the interview like professionals." Jackson paused, looking directly at Kimmel with a gaze that could have melted steel. "Professionals? You want to talk about professionalism now? After spending the last 10 minutes questioning my relevance, my talent, and dismissing my concerns about racism as playing cards." The tension was nearly visible. Cameras zoomed in on both men, capturing what had become the most explosive late-night television moment in years. Social media had already begun buzzing as clips circulated online. "This conversation is over," Jackson declared, dropping his microphone onto the chair with finality. But Kimmel, in stunning misjudgment, wasn't ready to let it end. As Jackson turned to leave, the host called out, loud enough for all to hear, "Running away isn't going to change the fact that your best days are behind you, Sam." Jackson stopped, the entire studio gasping. Even the band looked shocked at their host's audacity. Slowly, deliberately, Jackson turned back, his face a mask of controlled fury. "What did you just say to me?" His voice was deadly quiet, carrying to every corner of the studio. Kimmel, ignoring the tension, pressed on. "You heard me? You're walking away because you can't handle the truth. Your career peaked 20 years ago, and everyone knows it, except you." The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson walked back toward the interview area, but not to his chair. Instead, he stood directly in front of Kimmel's desk, towering over the host, who suddenly seemed to realize he may have gone too far. "Let me tell you something. Jimmy," Jackson began, his voice rising with intensity. "I've been in this industry for over 4 decades. I've worked with directors you couldn't even get a meeting with. I've broken barriers you've never had to face, all while maintaining my dignity and professionalism, something you clearly know nothing about." The audience murmured in agreement, the tide turning against their usual host. Camera phones appeared throughout the crowd as people captured what they knew was history in the making. "You want to talk about truth?" Jackson continued, his voice filling the studio. "Here's the truth. You brought me on this show tonight, not to promote my work, but to tear me down for your entertainment. You've shown me less respect than a reality TV contestant, all while hiding behind the guise of just asking questions." Kimmel tried to interject. "Sam, I'm not finished." Jackson's voice boomed with the authority of someone who had commanded respect on movie sets worldwide. "You've questioned my relevance, attacked my artistic choices, dismissed my concerns about racism, and then had the unmitigated gall to call me too sensitive. And now, as I decide I've had enough of your disrespect, you insult me as I leave." The audience began applauding, slowly at first, then growing into a thunderous ovation. Jackson raised his hand to quiet them. "Not finished. But here's what really bothers me, Jimmy. It's not just about me. It's about every veteran actor, every person of color, everyone who's ever been told to step aside for someone younger or more marketable. Your attitude tonight represents everything wrong with this industry's treatment of experienced professionals." Kimmel sat frozen, finally understanding the gravity of his actions, but seemingly unable to respond. Jackson's voice took on a tone of finality. "I came here tonight to talk about my craft, my new project, maybe share stories your audience would enjoy. Instead, I've been subjected to what can only be described as a public ambush designed to humiliate me. Well, congratulations, Jimmy. You've succeeded in showing everyone exactly who you are." Turning to the audience, Jackson's demeanor softened. "To everyone here tonight and watching at home, I apologize that you had to witness this unprofessional display. You deserve better entertainment than watching someone try to tear down a guest for cheap laughs." As Jackson moved toward the exit, the audience erupted into sustained applause and a standing ovation. The cameras followed him as he walked with dignity, while Kimmel remained at his desk, stunned and deflated. Before reaching the door, Jackson paused and turned back one final time. "Jimmy, you asked if it was time for me to step aside. I'll leave that to the people who actually matter. The audiences who support my work and the colleagues who respect what I bring to this industry. As for you, maybe it's time to take a long look in the mirror and ask yourself if this is really the kind of host you want to be." With that, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, head held high, leaving a shocked studio and a host who had clearly bitten off more than he could chew. The aftermath was swift and severe. Within hours, clips of the confrontation were trending across social media. "Respect Samuel L. Jackson and Kimmel crosses the line" became top trending topics worldwide. Entertainment industry veterans and newcomers alike defended Jackson, praising his composure and condemning Kimmel's behavior. The show's ratings plummeted in the following weeks as advertisers pulled support and celebrity guests declined appearances. Kimmel issued multiple public apologies, but the damage to his reputation was irreversible. Meanwhile, Jackson's standing in Hollywood was only elevated, demonstrating why he remains one of the industry's most respected figures. The confrontation became a watershed moment, sparking important conversations about respect, professionalism, and the treatment of veteran performers in entertainment.